For the first time ever, the hosts of Love in the Night Paranormal Readathon thought that they would do a spring edition of the Readathon to celebrate the Southern Hemisphere's fall cozy time. And of course, I was super excited to read some more paranormal romance, so I jumped right in. How did the Readathon go for you? I think it went okay. It would have been great if I could have finished the Claire Kent Kindle series, or if I could have got to a couple like for real paranormal romances, but still 5 books is not too bad. I didn't end up vlogging because I knew I was going to read this Claire Kent Kindle series, and I generally knew what my reaction was going to be, so I didn't feel like I was going to be popping my head up and talking to camera a lot. Also, I didn't know that I could force myself to do so, like even if I set a timer or whatever, so I just figured why even bother. We are still going to talk in detail about these first impression books, as well as like one bonus not Claire Kent book I read this past week too. On the plus side, I did get quite a few recs for paranormal romances that are now on the TBR for me to read down the road, and I was able to catch one of the reading springs that were hosted this past week, as well as watching the replay of the live show for the group read Sing Me to Sleep. I didn't personally reread it for this readathon, but it was fun to hear everyone's take on it and kind of like remember my likes and dislikes on it. And if you missed it, I recommend you check out the replay of the live because all of the hosts go over the different books they read, what their highs and lows were, so you will also get a ton of fun paranormal romance recommendations if you're looking for that. But let's just go ahead and dive into what I ended up reading. Starting with Embers by Claire Kent. This was a rough book, and it made for a very difficult start for the readathon for me. In retrospect, once I saw how poorly it was going, I probably should have skipped it and moved on, since each one of these books in the Kindle series you could read as a standalone even though they're part of a larger connected universe. Generally speaking, I do not like large age gap romances. On page, I can usually overlook like the signals that there's a big age gap, so it bothers me a lot less in print than it does on screen. Additionally, the Kindle series happens in a post-apocalyptic world where a huge environmental event wiped out most of humanity. So for me, like the community that these people are reforming, the relationships, the romances, they're not working in like the world we're in now with like all options on the table. Sometimes you just gotta work with what you got, and sometimes that's gonna be like a traditionally less than ideal relationship. Certainly it doesn't remove all taboos and all problems that you might have in like the modern world with romance relationships, but as far as age gaps go, I think it reduces the stigma of that dramatically. That said, this one was really pushing me to my limits, considering the premise is that Rachel meets her boyfriend's father at 17 and they all like hide in a cabin during the apocalypse. The boyfriend dies and then she gets together with his dad. So like right away, I have an issue with her being 17 when she meets the father, even though she hates the father at that point in time and he's not a romantic interest. There's just like this creepy element of like the adult ass man checking out a minor and like sort of lying in wait, not only for the son to die, but also for her to come of age, so it's like okay, even though we're in a post-apocalyptic world, so I guess there are no rules about that anymore. It just feels so predatory, I don't think I can like overlook it. It doesn't help that we get like the beginning in time where she hates this guy, and then we jump 2 years into the future after her boyfriend's death, and we don't get like any of the bonding or like emotional change go on. She's just already there quasi in love with him and like trying to figure out if there's potential for a bigger relationship and how she could push that forward. So like, I don't know what she fell in love with about him. I don't know how they mended a relationship that was antagonistic to be more friendly or like peer related. I also don't know like the growth from him seeing her as a child that needed to learn a lot, that was like a burden and need protection, to like a peer that could watch his back and like meet him on his level. Because like for me, a romantic love interest has to be someone that can make like a peer equal connection. And you know, part of the issue with age gap in general is that like the older person doesn't necessarily see the younger person as a peer. They see them as like a person that they can shape and mold and sort of like influence unduly and in inappropriate ways. That's the issue with the relationship. Then you need to go some distance to showing me that's not at play. It also doesn't help that the two of them are super isolated, so she hasn't seen anyone else besides him in like 3 years. years. So she is not doing a lot to beat the allegations that she's only romantically interested in him because he's literally the only other person around her. All of this is a shame because Rachel and Cal have pretty decent sized minor roles in the first 2 books, which makes you really interested about them, their relationship, how they got together, all that kind of stuff. And they continue to be pretty important throughout the rest of the books in the series. So like ideally you would think the relationship is sweet and you would be rooting for them. But first of all, I hate Cal. I do not like the person he is. I do not like how he handles things. I don't like how he talks to her. I don't like how he acts. There's nothing about him that I like, enjoy, appreciate, empathize with. So that makes it pretty hard for me to root for the romance just on that level. You didn't show me the parts where Rachel softened to him, so I can't even be like happy for her. When Rachel finally does start seeing other people again, the author introduces a bunch of people who object to their relationship and say all the things that I think a reader is probably already thinking or feeling about this relationship, and does nothing to combat that. Like, Rachel attempts to make an argument, but the argument is incoherent and doesn't actually address any of the real issues that we might have with this relationship. I suppose it is an interesting question for us to ask whether we should trust our own judgment and observation in the relationship that we're seeing. Like, even if it's from Rachel's perspective, I'm seeing massive red flags and problems. Or if we should take Rachel at her word and treat her as an adult and let her pursue whatever makes her happy. But this question doesn't actually make this relationship a romance, does it? And a romance implies like a happily ever after, which means I have to root for Rachel and Cal being together in a relationship. And I don't know that the book has done anything to make me root for this relationship. I don't know that I find their interactions positive or like an improvement in both of their lives. There were ways we could have sold this romance. It was Claire Kent's choice to make it disgusting. She did not need to make all the other characters they meet side-eye their relationship, assume that they're a father-daughter duo, and when they find out that there's something like romantic going on and they're not blood related, assume that he is in some way taking advantage of and or abusing her. When Rachel is incapable of responding to that criticism, in fact, like the way she responds to it continues to re-emphasize her childlike, naive, inability to articulate things kind of aspect of her character, which for me reinforced the idea that there's something abusive in their relationship or in the age gap within their relationship. And it also like reinforced the idea that Rachel doesn't really know what she wants or needs or what could make her happy. It strengthened my idea on the should we listen to her or should we separate her from him for her own good side. Like, I'm more on the separate her for her own good side based off of her response. I'm also kind of like confused about what Claire Kent's goals were in this relationship, because on one side it's very clear she's trying to make a taboo, like father of my boyfriend, love interest kind of narrative, and she wants to make that like romantic or acceptable or like steamy in some kind of way, but she doesn't lean into all the things that make that icky and taboo. So like, for example, Rachel and her boyfriend were like childhood friends that kind of like naturally flowed into boyfriend and girlfriend. Boyfriend was really religious, so they didn't really do more than hold hands and kiss. And it is unclear based off of how Rachel talks about him or talks to him if her love was ever like of the romantic variety for this boyfriend, or if he was just like a first experience in the boyfriend-girlfriend market that she kind of like went with because they were such close friends and he had intense feelings for her, but she didn't necessarily return them. And if like all of this background context is true, the connection between the boyfriend and boyfriend's father becomes like less gross, less unappealing, less off-putting. Also, this boyfriend dies of a disease that a lot of people got after the comet impact, and there's no way for them to cure or help him. They just have to slowly watch him die over the course of 2 years, which means that the father is not at fault for his death, where like if it had been an attack or an ambush and the dad either wasn't around or he got there just a little too late to save his son, there would have been more tension or like sense of wrongness or whatever. So again, this is a situation where Claire Kent originally set up something that was icky, taboo, and off-putting, and then did a lot of work to try and like mitigate it, which just to me confuses what is the point of this romance, what's the goal, what's the like taboo trend thing that we're trying to do here. And to be clear, I'm not saying I wanted this to be a messier situation situation. I don't like the setup. I probably would have preferred if she'd set it up some other way. Minimally, if this man had not been the boyfriend's father, because that's just sort of like weird and puts a lot of pressure on things that doesn't need to be there when we already have like this girl not liking this older man and him meeting her when she's 17. It's just at the same time, if this is what you're gonna do, if you're gonna set this premise up, then commit. But for me, I think the death blow here is how Claire Kent jumps over the time where the two of these people would have been bonding. I need to know how she goes from disliking this man, thinking he's crude and gross, to liking him. I need to know how he goes from seeing her as a child, his son's girlfriend, into like a peer and noticing her as a woman. When is it that he starts to like trust and rely on her, feel confident about her? When does she start to see this guy's good traits, not just like for survival, but maybe like his subtle, silent kindnesses or like respect moments or whatever? A lot of time this guy is doing the very bare effing minimum and she's so grateful for it, and I just want both of them to fall off a cliff. I mean, to be fair to this book, it did make me even more hyped for Mac's relationship. We got a little bit more about his love interest, and with that we got a little bit more about the women-only warrior group that's going around and fighting bad people, which was also very interesting and something I appreciated. So like, I would say overall this book wasn't 100% a miserable slog, because there were things that were interesting or great little world-building moments in it, but I will say the relationship is by far the worst in the series. I cannot root for them. I think Cal did the right thing when he left Rachel, although like the circumstances of it make him even worse of a man, unforgivable in a million ways. I'm on Team Faith's side when she's like, we don't forgive men who leave. But since Cal is a major player in this world going forward, I guess we couldn't have Rachel settle down with like a nice age-appropriate man. Which is another thing that's weird about this series. There are so many age-appropriate men for these girls just hanging around, and we never ever explore them or explore what's attracted them to these older men. Rolling Me Into Hero by Claire Kent. This story, in comparison to Embers, is kind of a little bit of a nothing burger. It's light, it's short, it's kind of fluffy. There's a lot more I like about it. It felt a little bit like filler in the series, but at the same time, I really liked this relationship. I liked the new and interesting elements that Claire Kent like wrapped in to keep the formula fresh. For starters, we're working with a girl who left her engineering major in college to like hide out at the end of the world. So we've got like some of that intelligent girl, potential engineering element going on. And her love interest is going to be her stepdad's brother. So again, it's like one of those age gap relationships, but it's super easy to overlook in this situation because the man was living such like an immature life beforehand, and he's really like stepped up into this role, so he feels quite young. If I didn't know his age, I would assume he was like early 20s, even based off his behavior in the apocalypse. But what makes this fresh isn't just like the brainy girl with anxiety she's dealing with, which I liked how the book portrayed the anxiety mostly. I have a small quibble with it like completely going away when she hooks up with this guy, but the story is not wrong that like giving you something else to focus on when you're spiraling in some kind of anxiety spiral is good. And if that thing is like actually doing something or something physical, it's even better because like your brain has to focus on moving and coordinating and feeling and sensation. So like her either going down into the trips to find more supplies, or her like having steamy time if she's trapped at night and like having an anxiety spiral, both make sense. Like her feeling better and her afterwards like having this not just like physical relief, but like anxiety relief or release from that too. I think like the book did a good job portraying that, although there is a moment where it's sort of like magically her anxiety is gone once the relationship's a little more solidified and they're someplace safer, which again, there are outside factors that impact anxiety. So like if you're in a better, safer situation and if you're with good, reliable people, you are more likely to have less anxiety, but it's like complete disappearance was a little much for me. But that's not even what I think the fresh element is. The fresh element here is that the love interest, Zed, originally came into this cabin with his pregnant girlfriend. So even though the pregnant girlfriend didn't survive a year after giving birth to their child, it's gonna be our main character, Zed, and his child, Rena. And they're acting like a family unit way before they get together, but I think having a 5-year-old child in the mix, having her being like present and them having to consider her pretty much at all times adds something else that we haven't seen before in any of these post-apocalyptic series, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was refreshing to have like a young kid in the mix. I thought it was refreshing to see two characters who are always considering somebody else outside of themselves. I thought it was really neat to see a relationship like getting built and seeing what they mean to each other, but at the same time acknowledging that this child, Rena, is always going to come first. Sort of navigating that relationship, navigating what that means, all of that kind of stuff was really cute, sweet. I liked them meeting Mac and Rachel for the first time, having that conversation. I was low-key a little disappointed that they decided to travel back east to like the Kentucky area we have already known and seen as readers, instead of going forward with Mac into like those Midwest civilizations that I heard so much about at the end of the last book, but which all the way here through Sanctuary we have no details on. But it makes sense from Zet's point of view for them to go back east to what is known and recommended to them instead of traveling out west. Would have made even more sense if they had waited for these people to come back from their pickup and they had traveled together back to Kentucky. But I suppose that's because the majority of this is a road trip to get to Kentucky. And to be honest with you, that part of the story is really boring. To a certain degree, like even though I find this series like creative and fun, I think that Claire Kent's like over-focus on the relationships means that she's not really looking at the details of the post-apocalyptic world, of what could be happening or not happening, what could be interesting, what someone would or wouldn't observe, and because of that it all starts to feel bland and boring, like on these travels day to day or whatever. But besides like shortening the trip to get to the new colony, I was also a little bit disappointed with what we did with our main characters' like scientific know-how. The relationship building is good, the short misunderstanding they have, them getting together, all that works. I think having the young child there, great. But when she gets to this colony, she is a part-time teacher and a part-time gardener. And I don't understand why she isn't using her engineering background in like applicable ways. Like for example, in Rebecca the Roan Horse's Trail of Lightning, Maggie has converted her pickup truck over from running on gas to running on booze. Why hasn't somebody else in this world done something like that? Like found an alternative way to run these cars, found an alternative way to give like key technology back, maybe found a way to run aspects of the technology that would help them with survival on manpower even, or air, like turbines or water power. Like, she has the engineering degree to do this. A little bit I've been overlooking that the rest of the cast has just sort of like gone back to medieval times because like what are they gonna do? They don't have this information, knowledge, or training. But I feel like she potentially does. And even if she's not good at engineering like that, they said her goal was to go into NASA. So I would love it if she was like recording data on the weather changes, how the asteroid impacted that, what that means, making predictions out into the future about how things are going to stabilize or when they're going to stabilize, what the new normal looks like her being a weather person would have been great. You know, I still think she should be teaching the next generation. I'm not trying to denigrate teaching. Holding onto this knowledge and moving it forward is valuable, but it would have been even better if she was using her spare time to apply it and improve it, or maybe even working with the kids and the kids were having these brainstorming moments and inspiring and like creating things, and in that way she was like teaching the people who were doing the big moving shaking things going forward. But either way, we needed to see this knowledge in use. Like there's so many applications for it. I just don't understand why we didn't do anything with it. That moves me into Citadel by Claire Kent, and this is my favorite book I read this week. First of all, we did something great. We started out on the coastline like east of Kentucky, and I love this because I love seeing a new and different way that people are surviving and interacting. Them like holing up in a hotel that's like out at sea so no one can approach it without a boat, great. And Del going off, fishing, collecting seaweed, her scavenging things specifically that are in plastic airtight tubs that wash ashore. All of that really good. I thought her romantic connection to Cole was good, even though it was a little bit insta-lovey because Del is sort of innocent, naive, trusting, very empathetic, like just sort of has a sixth sense kind of knowing and understanding people. It kind of works. I like Del's patient and forgiving nature. I think it pairs very well with Cole's own trouble. Additionally, this book adds like a new element in because Del is sisters with Anna and the two of them are sort of like traveling together, the last family. So there's like this sister family bond relationship here, and we haven't explored like family in the dystopian apocalypse yet. And I think it mirrors very well Cole's situation because Cole has a brother Matt who's like out with the roving gangs, and the reason Cole is wandering up and down the coast in the first place is because he's trying to catch up with Matt Matt, get him away from those gangs, and like teach his brother a better way of life. You know, so on one side we have Dell and Anna. They're sisters. They do anything for each other, sacrifice to each other, staying together for the end. And on the other side, we've got Cole and Matt, who like Cole would do anything for his brother, but Matt seems to be running away from him all the time and maybe just running away from the reality of what his life is versus what his life could have been. It's kind of funny that I love this relationship so much because in a lot of ways, Dell and Cole's relationship mirrors Rachel and Cal's relationship, where the big incident is Dell and Cole sleep together and then Cole leaves Dell without a word and doesn't return to her for 2 years. Rachel and Cal sleep together and the next morning Rachel wakes up and realizes that Cal is left without a word and they don't see each other for 2 years either. What's key different here is the context. When Cole leaves Dell knew that was a possibility, even a strong probability, because Cole is searching for his brother. And she sort of like asked him to stay with her, asked him to give it up, and he says he'll think about it. And obviously he ends up leaving her to continue to search for Matt. So like what he is doing and why he is doing that means something. Also that Dell was aware this was a thing, like a very high possibility in their relationship. Meanwhile, when Rachel and Cal split, Rachel and Cal have been together. It seems like they're going to be together forever. He has just admitted that he loves her. He promises they'll talk about it in the morning, and she wakes up and he's gone. And she has no way to find him. She doesn't know what he's doing, where he is, why he's gone. The protagonist's foreknowledge of what's going on, what the probability is, along with them understanding the reason and even like tacitly approving even though they're hurt and heartbroken over that call, really, really matters to me in a relationship, which makes me like love this, be rooting for Dell and Cole, wanting them to like overcome the odds and work together. With Rachel and Cal, I just want to kick Cal to the curb and never see his ugly ass face again. I also kind of love the unsubtle name drop we get for the love interest for Anna being Aiden. First of all, Aiden has a very unique background because he's here in America with a British accent, and you're like, wow, this has to be an interesting story just to start, because like his homeland was completely destroyed when the comet impacted it, and he was stuck over here, I guess, and is surviving somehow despite all the odds. I want to hear about that. Also, I love a blonde guy with a British accent because it reminds me of Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I am here for any kind of Spike romance relationship or Spike adjacent thing. It would only be better if we described Aiden with very high cheekbones. And also, I'm really happy to see Aiden here because for the longest I was very afraid that Cole and Dell were going to get together, and that was going to mean that Anna was going to have to get together with Matt. And I have some questions about Matt. He immediately joined the roving band of gangs that like have been pillaging, looting, murdering indiscriminately in this world. He had an opportunity when these ginormous gangs were like breaking up into smaller gangs and like settling down for him to calm down, and he didn't. He like continued roaming the coast and being a murderous asshole. And like, I am very curious about Matt. I think introducing a character like that is very interesting. We are in a world where there are no prisons. So what does a no prison justice system look like for a man who has just been murdering indiscriminately, often for fun? And were murders not necessarily even the worst of his crimes? How does one decide to do that? How do they decide to stop doing that? Is he just dragged away from that life because of his brother? And can his brother somehow redeem or teach that away? Is there a single settlement still standing in the world that will accept one of these ex-gang members knowingly, or do they have to like hide his past? Like, there's a lot of interesting, rich questions there. I do not see it being any kind of positive if we tried to redeem him through love or like force Anna to deal with his redemption arc. Like, that doesn't feel fair or right. And certainly, even if he somehow redeems himself and like becomes a good member of society and like really learns that everything he did was awful, why it was awful, and like, I don't know, makes some kind of restorative justice. I don't even know what that would look like. That's part of what would be interesting about it. But like, even if he made all those steps, I don't necessarily think that he deserves a relationship or deserves love. Like, I think that puts who he is and what he did into aspirational inspirational a light because it would be a romance, and I'm not down for that. So huge relief to see Aiden here, because that means Aiden's gonna be the romance and not Matt. And that leads me into Sanctuary. This is kind of a duology even within the Kindled series, because we deal with Dell, the younger sister's romance, back in Citadel, and now we're over here in Sanctuary to deal with Anna's romance. I think that this is a close second favorite read because talking about Anna gives me more context for Dell's life, more context for their relationship, so that makes like a lot of what was happening in that first book even more sweet. And also it like further characterizes Anna, what her sacrifices were or were not, where she is in her journey. It gives us a little more inside look into like how people were surviving, what they were doing to survive, what these settlements really mean is like reestablishing new hope and community. Her relationship with Aiden is fine. I don't feel like Aiden's backstory is as good as it could have been, but it's acceptable. I do really like when the two of them are like fighting over jobs, even though I think it was really silly that Aiden ever felt like there wasn't enough jobs for the two of them to split. There's sort of like a fun playfulness there. I'm low-key a little disappointed that Anna doesn't go hang out with the women warrior group. I would have preferred that, I think, to her loving Aiden and staying in a relationship with him. I think like a little bit she needed that for herself. But like how the two of them get together where they're fighting over this job, they're head-to-head racing, competing for it. She gets into a sticky situation, Aiden saves her. The two of them bond, they find an attraction and a chemistry together. They're sort of exploring something together neither one of them thought they'd find again. The betrayal there is real and raw, and I like how Anna treats that. But also what Aiden does to redeem himself like makes him worthy or whatever. Like it's more than enough. He loses a hand, he's permanently injured, no longer as strong as he used to be. He really did face potentially dying to save her. So like I can see where it would have been a shitty thing for her to be like, cool, thank you, and now I'm gonna go hang out with these women warriors. Not that like he is owed this relationship, but I can see how it like reinvested her in something that she was already kind of passionately feeling. Also, Matt dies, so we don't have to explore any of that stuff I was talking about in Citadel, which I guess is good because I don't know that Claire Kent is competent in handling something like that. It's like a very heavy, deep topic. Even if she was able to do it, this is not the series to do it in. These are kind of like fluffy relationships, finding hope in dark moments kind of thing. And I don't know that like a redemption story like this can fit into that. Additionally, something that I never personally talk about in these reviews, but I feel like it's worth mentioning now, all of these settlements have a surplus of men. And in fact, they seem to have a surplus of young men in specific, which first of all, we know from extreme survivor situations, this is not realistic. Like one of the things I learned when reading The Indifferent Stars Above, the true story about the Donner Party, is that women disproportionately survive strife and catastrophe versus men for a host of reasons. So this gender split is not realistic. But on top of that, there being so many young men and all of these being relatively young women, these young men are interested in these young women, and these young women are always picking some old ass man who's not even part of the community, not even for realsies contributing. Like that's gotta burn their biscuits a little bit. And I'm not saying that like these girls need to pick these young guys or like these young guys are owed anything or anything like that. But there has got to be a certain level of tension, frustration, just existing in this post-apocalyptic world to start with, right? And then if you incorporate a dude like Matt, who isn't only hell of older, but isn't even a good guy, he used to be part of the gangs that are murdering you all. Yeah, I don't know how you can accept him into the community. I certainly don't know how you accept him in the community if he ends up hooking up with a chica. So I guess I'm relieved we didn't really try that, but it also was a little dissatisfying for Matt to just like die, because you had introduced all these very interesting questions, concerns, like all this thoughtful stuff we could have been doing, and the only answer to it was to kill him off, like heroically trying to save his brother. I don't know. It's an interesting case. I am going to be thinking about Matt's part in this story for a while afterward. And that's moving me into Marked and Claimed by Charleigh Harper. Decided to give the Queer Kent series a rest and wanted to read something that was actually legitimately paranormal. I picked this up despite Heather over at Heo Booktube's warnings, because she kind of picked this up in February and didn't like it because the cover is stunning. But also it's like a werewolf, why choose, shift your romance, and I thought that could be fun. Like that's exactly the paranormal sort of thing I read. I probably should have taken both Heather's warning, but also the author's notes warning, because right at the top it says that it is paranormal erotica, not paranormal romance. romance. And I'm not down for paranormal erotica just as a general rule. Like, I want the relationship, I want the world building, I want all of that fun stuff. I'm not really here just for Steam's sake. But I mean, the first line of this reads, "I stood naked, drenched in the blood of my enemy." And that's a metal as hell line. It hooked me right away. Next, I find out that the man is called Darius and his wolf is called Jasper. So that makes me think that in this werewolf shifter world, there are going to be two distinct personalities wanting different things and trying to find like some kind of balance, or at least like one of them wanting to act one way and the other one like holding them back from time to time. Right? Because why would you name your wolf something entirely separate if they didn't have different reactions from you, if they didn't have like a mind that was sentient and alien from your own? And that's an interesting thing that I haven't seen done in werewolf shifter stories. I do sometimes see werewolf shifter stories where the person names their wolf, and I never really understand why. It's often a mark of a very low end story. But through this like separation between the human and the wolf, I do think that this is potentially a way to explore various aspects of like a dissociative identity disorder, because they're just like born with two separate souls in them and like they want different things and they have to navigate having one body, even if that body can shift between human and wolf. And it's a little bit like an extension of what's already kind of interesting about werewolf shifters, where there's like the human wants and needs versus like the animal wants and needs and balancing those two things. My interest is like way through the roof at this point. And then as a reader, we're kind of thrown like right away into thinking about werewolf society, because this dude is an alpha, his pack has just fought a war, a neighboring pack is there helping him fight the rogues, and he calls the guy he killed the rogue king, but he's the alpha. So why do the rogues have a king and him and his packs all have alphas? Also, what's the difference between a king and an alpha? Like in a lot of these books, they kind of feel very the same. Also, what's the difference between like a rogue pack and like these normal ass packs? Generally speaking, like in werewolf society, rogues are people who have been kicked out of the pack for committing crimes. And when we're talking about men, usually they're actually god-awful men. And when we're talking about women, like half the time, the female protagonist has like been forced to be a rogue, or their mom has been forced to be a rogue, and it's just because they're like trying to protect children or standing up for disenfranchised people. So we get very conflicting lore drop historically in this genre about what it could mean to be a rogue, but arguably there are definitely men and women rogues, so it makes sense if being a rogue drives a werewolf mad, which is common werewolf lore, that they would find each other and create packs. From that, there might be children. These children would be packless or be part of the rogue pack, but have done nothing wrong. All this is like basic common sense stuff, right? But for some reason, Darius assumes that all rogues are awful, evil beings. Which is also weird because all these packs have different rules and laws and they all get to decide punishment in of themselves. So like one pack might cast you out for being a rogue because like you didn't bring enough fish in when you were fishing. And another one might cast you out and make you a rogue for SAing someone. Those are two different things. Those are two different kinds of people. I don't understand this aspect of society. And if you're gonna throw me in the middle of it and have this guy hate all rogues, including people who are just born outside of the pack structure, it's gonna be really off-putting to me. Especially because we get all this in a couple paragraphs with no explanation, so I only have context from other werewolf shifter stories I've read to fill in the blanks, and based off of that information, this guy is a toxic, broski, douchebag, insecure asshole who has to go. Which, like, let's talk about the kind of man Darius is, because he immediately notices something unusual when he kills the rogue king, and he's like trying to figure it out when his lead warrior mind speaks to him and asks him, "Alpha, should we take down the remaining rogues or should we imprison them?" And Darius says, "Do nothing yet." Which, like, if I'm the lead warrior and my commander tells me to do nothing while these people are just standing around, I'm also just gonna be silent and confused. Like, it's one thing if you want me to kill them, it's one thing if you want me to capture them for questioning, but if I do nothing, then these rogues can do whatever the heck they want while I'm just waiting for commands about what to do next. That makes no sense. You lose total control of the situation. If this is a trap or something, you're letting them set up or execute on the rest of the trap. And if something weird is happening, wouldn't you want to imprison these people so that you can question them them as necessary to figure out what's going on and then determine what to do from there. Basically what I'm trying to say is that Darius has made a very unexpected command that makes no sense. The only logical thing to do is reply with silence. But this guy not acknowledging his order pisses Darius the hell off. And not only does he have to like barely restrain himself from killing his head warrior, someone who's highly skilled, who's very loyal to him, probably enforces pack order when they're not at war too, so he's probably very respected and high up in the community generally. But he like releases his alpha aura out and like makes everyone uncomfortable and suffer because this one guy was confused by his command. And even worse, right after he does that, he's like round them all up and imprison them. Broski did all this to actually end up choosing one of the two options this guy originally gave him anyways. So like his first command was stupid AF. I think it was supposed to show that Darius is very powerful and like commanding or whatever, but I gotta tell you, a real leader, a real man who's actually confident in himself and like his abilities, his leadership, his own perceptions, they don't get homicidal when someone is confused by an order they give. They might not like answer questions or handle back chat necessarily depending on the situation, but they probably just don't do anything as long as that guy obeys the order. And I am also let down in this scene because both Darius and his wolf Jasper interact and feel exactly the same effing way about this situation. They are on the same page the whole of this story. So I guess naming the wolf something different than their own personal name is a mark against the story, indicating this is one of those bad, really low brow, low tier stories. Very disappointing. My hopes for the story way down. I didn't like it, but there are a couple of other things I want to point out to you. In chapter 2, we finally meet the love interest. The alpha and the beta are going to be both her mates, which we're just going to accept becausies. But what's really funny about this is the two of them physically press up against her, and she says that she could feel them and she could feel their physical happiness. Girl called erections physical happiness. This is so cringe. This is on the same level as calling boobs fun bags. I just could not get over it. It's real awful. And don't even get me started about the fact that Beta and the Alpha are there with her dad looking for her and acting like this. Like, oh my god, kill me now. Not hot at all. So overall, I would say that this author didn't really execute on the hot steaminess element. They didn't execute on a story component. They didn't execute in good characterization. This was not for me. I'm not sure who it was for. Additionally, there were a ton of grammar errors and like formatting notes that were left in and then they didn't make the formatting corrections or whatever. So I just think this was an unpolished mess overall. I'm hoping this is one of this author's first books and that they're going to continue to improve and grow in their writing craft. But I definitely think that they probably should have workshopped this for a little bit longer and definitely should have read through it one more time because the grammar errors and the notes about formatting that they don't make corrections to are just like egregious. This was kind of a fun campy way though for me to end off the readathon, and that's going to be everything I read in the Love in the Night Paranormal week-long readathon. Talk to me in those comments down below. Do you have a paranormal romance I should check out next? And if you got this far with nothing else to say, leave me one of those moon emojis in the comments down below. And as always, keep reading.